He'll be followed by our discussant, Philippe Vermont, who's in charge of the politics group at CSIS. So, Dave, over to you. By way of self-policing, or in the direction of self-policing, 35 minutes, and then we all start looking uncomfortable.
That will move it forward in there. Yep. Okay. Excellent. Oh, well, good morning, everyone. Thanks for coming. And coming up next year, I think this discussion has changed tone. And the reason has been the election last year of Joko Widodo, ubiquitously known as Jokowi, to the position of Jakarta governor, where previously widespread voter disillusionment and dropping voter turnouts stood as evidence of the defects of Indonesian democracy. A new optimism would cast those features as possible political capital for Jokowi or a like-minded rival candidate to win the presidency next year. And when I asked Indonesians putting together this talk whether and why next year's elections are important, the answers centred on the possibility of change, that this could be the first time since Reformasi that there would be a change of generation in Indonesian politics, that civil society dreamed that they might have access to decision makers, and that with an alternative candidate there was an excellent chance for there to be change. But is this sort of optimism going to be fleeting, a cycle of hope and disappointment, as one Jakarta editor put it to me, that is intrinsic to politics? How great an impact has Jokowi's rise really have, and will it have, on Indonesian politics? And indeed, will he even be able to run for president? I'll address those themes today and also offer some thoughts as to whether we will see a changing of the guard in next year's elections, and consider, if there is a new leader, whether they'll be able to tackle some of the entrenched defects of democracy in Indonesia. But first, briefly, I'll discuss stagnation, a familiar theme to anyone who's been to the Indonesia updates over the years, as the idea that democratic reform in Indonesia has stalled, stagnated, or even regressed has become pervasive. The reasons are, of course, familiar. Most of the key reforms to establish a democratic order were concluded during the first 5 to 6 years after Suharto stepped down, and since then there's been far less reformist legislation enacted. The Parliament, the DPR, only enacts around 30 bills a year, and many of those are the budget or the extremely important bills to establish new districts and provinces. Beyond that, some of the recent legislation the Parliament has enacted, out of that 30, the substantive bills have been criticised as regressive, such as the Mass Organisations Bill this year, or the proposal that's still on the table to end the direct election of